Should we just do us a shot of Jim Beam, just for old time's sake?
It's the Brian Lair Show on WNYC. I'm Amina Serna, filling in for Brian today, and that was Walton Goggins as Boyd Crowder on the FX series Justified. If you've seen that show, you know Crowder's is a voice thick with history, menace, and humor, and even if you haven't seen it, you can hear the music and his particular Southern accent. But in real life, off-screen, linguists say that voice is fading. Young people across the South are losing their accents or learning when not to use them. As those accents fade, something else fades with them. My guest is Annie Joy Williams, assistant editor at The Atlantic. She's a Southerner herself, and in a new essay called The Last Days of the Southern Drawl, she writes about accents she grew up hearing, about quieting her own accent as a teenager, and about what disappears when a regional way of speaking slips away. Hi, Annie. Welcome to WNYC.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
And listeners, we can take your calls on this. When does your Southern drawl come out? And when do you choose not to use it? We can also hear your celebrations of the Southern accent. 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. And I would say you can text as well, but I think we'd prefer for you to call on this one. Annie, you open the essay with a description of your father's voice. You write, his words fall out of his mouth the way molasses would sound if it could speak, thick and slow. I love the way you put that. Why don't you tell us about him? Where is he from, and where did you grow up hearing that sound every day?
Yeah, my father is from Georgetown, Kentucky, so kind of a small town Kentucky outside of Lexington. My mother is actually from the same place. They met when they were little kids, but now they live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I grew up. When I was a younger child, it was more of a small town, but now it's become, quite the big suburb outside of Nashville. But yeah, I heard this voice all the time. We lived on the county side of things as opposed to the city. So at school, I went to school in these kind of trailer home buildings, portable buildings, in rural Tennessee. And I remember learning from super Southern, teachers, and the way they would pronounce things, I always assumed was right because I hadn't been really exposed to people from other places. But yeah, my parents both have pretty strong Southern accents. My dad is a cattle farmer, so his is very, sometimes it just sounds like one giant word and you can't really distinguish what he's saying. But he, has his West Coast relatives, and he has, he was a pilot for a long time, so he would kind of code switch into this more digestible Southern accent, I guess for the sake of clarity and maybe being taken more seriously in those circles. And my mom, also has the Southern drawl that mainly comes out in church pew greetings. But she's a psychiatrist, and she can really, when she's calling in a prescription, she kind of turns it off to make sure her point's received and all of that.
When linguists talk about a Southern drawl, what do they actually mean? What's happening in maybe the mouth and the vowels when we hear it?
Okay, so I'm going to try not to butcher this because I am no linguist. I'm learning along with y'all when I wrote this article. So what they mean by the Southern drawl is really this thing called the Southern vowel shift. So this began in the late 1800s after the Civil War. And pretty much the first thing that happened is the I became an sound. So time turned to time. And the Southern vowel shift treats long vowels and short vowels differently, right? So with a long vowel, like beat or bait, you add a little sound before the original vowel. So beat, there's a little if you listen really closely. But with the short vowels, like bit or bet, the goes after the original vowel. So it's like bit, you hear that little hesitation. And that's where we get the word, the Southern drawl, because it's drawing out that vowel section of the word a little longer, adding a little flavor. So yeah, that is the main thing that distinguishes a Southern accent from any other accent, is the Southern vowel shift.
Let's go to a call. Greg in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hi, Greg.
Hi, thanks so much. This is really interesting. And it's funny that you were just talking about the way that the vowel gets held out, because my parents were both born in the Midwest. I grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. I came back from kindergarten on the first day, and my mother told me, I was like, "Hi, Mom, it's 5 and I'm alive." And my mom was like, "No, Greg, it's 5 and it's alive." And so, I mean, I think about like Tom Petty's record, Southern Accents, and like the first title track was like, "I Was Born a Rebel." And, like that sentiment isn't really where we're at anymore. And I mean, I love the South. I love the people I left, but do I want to return? No. I mean, I think that when I think of the Southern drawl, I think a lot of white supremacy and the history of that. And I mean, Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898. Hello. I mean, a racial coup, basically a massacre. But I think also about Charles Blow and the Great Reverse Migration that he wrote about. And I mean, for a reason why this is happening, why this intermixing is happening, and why. I mean, I grew up with neighbors from Jersey. And, like my neighbor would be like, "Hey, Greg, you want to go to the batting cage?" And he would call my brother Billy. And he'd be like, "Hey, Billy." And, like I didn't understand the accents at the time, but when do I use it? It was when I go back. It's a great rapport. Mm. It's a form of code switching, as you said, which I thought about. And then it's just like connecting with my roots without judgment, I think. So, I mean, I dated someone from Long Island when I first moved to New York, and now, like, I don't know. The screener said they could hear a Southern accent. I'm curious if you do hear one.
Greg, thank you so much for your call. Let's take another caller back to back here. Tom in Bed-Stuy, who does like to lay on the accent every once in a while here in Brooklyn. What would you like to say, Tom?
How's it going? So I'm from North Carolina, and where I'm from, like in the cities, in the urban area, like Durham and Greensboro, where I went to college, you don't hear it much. But if you go like 15 minutes outside of any of these urban centers, you hear it a lot more. And so, like, I've been in New York for 13 years, and as a bartender, sometimes I'll catch myself or kind of lean into it a little bit when I'm trying to lay on the service a little bit more to be a little sweeter, more ingratiating. I'll lean into it a little more. I don't really hear it much, but other people around me kind of hear it some. If I'm around other people from North Carolina, it definitely comes out.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And that's the last word, actually, that last Southern drawl we have for today. My guest has been Annie Joy Williams, assistant editor at The Atlantic, where you can read her story, The Last Days of the Southern Drawl. Annie, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned for all of it.
Since WNYC's first broadcast in 1924, we've been dedicated to creating the kind of content we know the world needs. Since then, New York Public Radio's rigorous journalism has gone on to win a Peabody Award and a DuPont Columbia Award, among others. In addition to this award-winning reporting, your sponsorship also supports inspiring storytelling and extraordinary music that is free and accessible to all. To get in touch and find out more, visit sponsorship.wnyc.org.